Coming up on Business Incorporated today, World Bank sets country partnership framework to aid Malawi's economic growth. Qatar and South Africa to strengthen bilateral relations. Zimbabwe's inflation rate falls to 194% in April. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We tee off the show with the markets now. Major indexes we track here in Africa are mostly positive. Only Nigeria's NGX declined by 0.70% as intraday. On the flip side, the JSA gained the most by 1.33%, while Egypt's index gained 0.46%. Kenya ended Thursday's session positive. In the Middle East, major markets we track were mixed at intraday. The market in Abu Dhabi declined marginally by 0.2%, while Dubai's index rose 0.24%. Elsewhere in the region, Saudi Arabia's index lost the most by 0.57%, while the Qatari index saw a marginal increase of 0.01%. European stocks traded higher this morning as investors digest a fresh round of corporate earnings and key economic data out of the Eurozone. Chelsea is standing by to fill us in on what's going on in Europe. Hello, Chelsea. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so markets have been rocked this week by fears that rising inflation will force central banks to pull back on stimulus. How are investors thinking about this in Frankfurt?
Well, inflation has definitely returned to the forefront as a major concern for investors. Yesterday, we saw stocks around the world really sell off on the prospect of inflation. Here in Frankfurt, the DAX was down almost 2%. We have seen stocks regaining a lot of that ground today. So investors seem to be taking all of this in stride. But what we do know is that inflation is rising. There's really no doubt about that, in part because economies are reopening, business activity is picking back up, but also because of more one-off factors, things like supply chain disruptions, the semiconductor shortage, the aftermath of the Suez Canal blockage. All of this is pushing up prices for a lot of businesses. The question is how long-lasting this inflation will be. So far, most economists, most investors don't think that this is going to be the beginning of a long-term rise in inflation. But if it is, then that would really change the outlook for a lot of investors here. The markets have been really rallying because central banks continue to pump a lot of stimulus into the markets. If they start to take that back, if they start to raise interest rates, that could really make a lot of investors rethink their investments.
Well, the EU is suspending its investment deal with China amid rising tensions between Brussels and Beijing. It took 7 years to strike this deal. Why is it now failing?
Well, this mostly comes down to the worsening diplomatic relationship between Europe and China, particularly after the European Union decided to impose sanctions on Chinese officials and Chinese business leaders in March due to China's treatment of its minority Muslim population, the Uyghurs. In response to the EU sanctions, China hit back with sanctions of its own. Some of those were imposed on certain members of European Parliament. So the EU Parliament is responsible for approving this deal. They have to ratify it before it can go into effect. So they're saying they're not going to ratify this deal with China if China has sanctions in place on European politicians. So for now, it does seem that this deal is on ice until relations improve between the two sides. But even today, we've seen the EU come out with several new proposals that really seek to widen the divide between the EU and China. They have proposed today a new industrial strategy, a new investment strategy, and all of that really is seeking to reduce the EU's dependence on China, which has been a major problem geopolitically in recent years because the EU is so dependent economically on China. But now they're really setting up these deals, these prospects, so that they won't be so reliant and that they'll be able to really build up their own economy here in Europe.
Wow, sounds like a long way before this is settled. Well, Eurozone services PMI for April was released today. How are the numbers looking?
Well, this was a strong reading from this PMI report. Today's report shows how services sectors across Europe were faring, and they really did a lot better than economists had expected. So the sector returned to growth in April, so it returned above the 50 level mark, and that's really what shows if a sector is growing. This was in large part due to Spain, which has been reopening parts of its economy. Here in Germany and also in Italy, we saw services sectors still under pressure, in part because many industries here, bars, restaurants, retail, remain under coronavirus restrictions. But all in all, we've seen these reports from these PMI reports really showing that the European economy is starting to find its footing. And this report today, economists say, raises the prospect that the EU might actually be able to grow in the second quarter after contracting in the first.
All right, thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing your thoughts with us and bringing us up to date with happenings in Europe. Enjoy the rest of your day. We move over now to London, where Juliana is waiting to give us updates. Also, hello, Juliana. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Nene.
Yeah, well, a lot of great agreements and deals coming from the talks between UK and India from the G7 talks. However, the risk of exposure to COVID-19 may dampen this great news after 2 Indian delegates have had to isolate so far. What's the latest on this?
Well, what we know is that the Indian foreign minister tweeted this morning that he will be going into isolation as 2 members of the Indian delegation tested positive for COVID-19. We're not exactly sure when they took the test and when the results came back. But according to the British government, who was really trying to play the story down, they were tested pretty strenuously before they left India. They've been tested every single day. And this is a massive test. This is a big test for diplomacy. We know that diplomacy across the world hasn't been taken face to face. And as this G7 foreign ministers meeting is a prelude to the world leaders meeting next month, Britain had hoped, that a story such as this wouldn't happen, especially as it comes amidst India being at the epicenter of COVID-19. We know yesterday 3,500 people lost their lives. Boris Johnson was supposed to meet the Indian foreign minister later today. That meeting will take place, albeit virtually. And I think for Britain, they would just like to hope and pray that this outbreak is concealed solely to this Indian delegation. The Financial Times were reporting earlier that these 2 individuals may not have been at any of the events that have been taking place since Monday at Lancaster House. It's wrapping up today. India, of course, not part of the G7 industrialized nations, but they have been invited along with South Korea, Australia and the South Africans just to come and sit through some of the proceedings. So it is a big story. It appears that it has been contained, but, fingers crossed that nobody else tests positive, because, of course, lots of diplomats, including the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, is in central London at the moment, and it would be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, we sure keep our fingers crossed and hope that it is already contained. Well, there are plans for extra funding to fast-track new vaccines to help future-proof the UK against new coronavirus variants. About £29.3 million is expected to be added. What's the strategy to this plan?
Well, the strategy is to make sure that Britain never again goes into one of these pretty economic disastrous lockdowns. Already they spent millions of pounds on a state-of-the-art facility. It's a top-secret facility run by the Ministry of Defence for obvious reasons. But now the vaccines minister, alongside the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, have announced this extra funding. And what they really want to do is ensure that with all the variants that we've seen over the past couple of months, including the South African, the Brazilian, the Kent variant, don't affect the efficacy of the COVID vaccines that we have at the moment. I believe what they're hoping this money will do is allow scientists to test blood samples of about 3,000 individuals to look at these new variants and to see whether or not these vaccines are strong enough to thwart away COVID-19. This news came out at the same time. A lot of health officials here in the UK have said that they do believe to try and stop there being another fourth or fifth wave in this country during the end of this year, that they will be offering over 50s a booster jab. We know that COVID-19, unfortunately, is not going anywhere. The world is going to have to live with the virus, and just to make sure that it doesn't get out in the society again, over 50s from the autumn will be given a booster jab to ensure that they're safe.
And how are the markets trading at this time?
Well, it's pretty good at intraday, Innie. It started off in positive territory, the blue chip index, and it's still there at intraday, being propped up by miners. Miners are doing exceptionally well at the moment, especially copper commodities. So the FTSE All Share is up 0.91%. The FTSE 100 is up by 1.09%. And the FTSE 250, the domestic market, is up by 0.17%. In currencies, the British pound also up on the US dollar by 0.22%. Up on the euro by 0.24% and also up on the Japanese yen at intraday by 0.24%, Innie.
All right, thank you so much, Juliana. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
So we move now to Australia, where shares rose earlier today, while some of the other major Asia-Pacific markets are closed. Further, the benchmark AX 200 traded 0.7% higher at 7,117.60, with a heavily weighted financial bond index up 0.84%. In Taiwan, the take was up 0.36%, while the Hong Kong's Hang Seng index rose 0.09%, while Singapore's Straits Times index declined 0.82%. Today's session in Asia follows an overnight session on Wall Street, where the S&P 500 fell amid selling in big tech and other high-growth stocks, while the Nasdaq Composite registered its worst day since March. Meanwhile, markets on the Chinese mainland, Japan, and South Korea remain closed for public holidays. And in the U.S., stocks futures rose early today following a session defined by major weaknesses in technology stocks. Dow futures added 101 points, while S&P 500 futures gained 0.40, and Nasdaq 100 futures rose 0.55%. In after-hours trading, Activation Blizzard rose nearly 6%. T-Mobile popped 2.8%. And ride-hailing company Lyft gained 7% after better-than-expected earnings report. On Tuesday, investors exited technology and growth stocks, pushing the Nasdaq Composite down 1.9%. Shares of Netflix lost 1.2%. Microsoft dropped 1.6%. Amazon and Facebook shed 2.2% and 1.3% each, while Apple dropped 3.5% and Alphabet fell 1.6%. The S&P 500 wiped out Monday's gains, dropping 0.7%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average ended the day positive with about 20 points after dropping more than 300% at one point yesterday. Well, we'll go to the commodities market now, with oil prices rose on early trade today after more U.S. states eased lockdowns and European Union sought to attract travelers. The soaring COVID-19 cases in India capped gains. Brent crude futures rose 1.48% at $68.50 a barrel after climbing by 1.2% on Monday, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures settled 1.86%. higher at $65.69 per barrel after a 1.4% jump on Monday. Both contracts were up about 2% in earlier trade. For further signs of rising U.S. oil demand, traders will be watching for reports on crude and product stockpiles from U.S. Energy Information Administration. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll go to the African continent. Welcome back. You're still watching Business Incorporated and Channels Television. Well, with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on economic development, especially in emerging economies, grant funding is a major opportunity entrepreneurs and startups across Africa would embrace eagerly and be glad to hear about. Africa's Business Heroes Prize competition, a Jack Ma Foundation's flagship philanthropic program, spotlighting and celebrating Africa's entrepreneurs, announced the third edition of its annual grant funding of £1.5 million in dollars, I beg your pardon, to boost entrepreneurship across Africa. Joining us now to talk more about this is Zara Boateng, the Partnerships and Program Manager for Africa's Business Heroes Prize competition. Hello, Zara. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for
good to have you here too. So what influenced this decision to set up Africa's Business Heroes Prize competition and grant?
So the ABH Prize competition was established in 2018 following Jack Ma's first visit to Africa in 2017. During that trip, Jack was inspired by the entrepreneurial energy and potential he saw in the young people he met with. He also recognized many of the same barriers to economic development and entrepreneurship in Africa that existed in China when he founded Alibaba in 1999. And he knew from firsthand experience the power of entrepreneurship to drive growth and spur innovation. And so Jack committed to do his part to inspire, train, and support entrepreneurs in Africa, build more inclusive business models that can create jobs and economic opportunity for the continent. And so the Africa Business Heroes program was born. And over a 10-year period, the program will recognize 100 African entrepreneurs and commit to allocating $100 million in grant funding, training programs, and support for the broader African entrepreneurial ecosystem. We run the Africa Business Heroes Prize competition, the Africa Business Heroes TV show, and we'll be launching an African Business Heroes virtual community in the near future.
Okay, so for this edition now, how many entrepreneurs are supposed to benefit? And for those, I mean, you mentioned 100 Africa entrepreneurs. How has this competition changed their lives or their businesses?
Sure. So let me start with the first question. In terms of how many are expected to benefit, last year we received about 22,000 applications. And I would say that every entrepreneur who successfully submits the application benefits from the competition. Why do I say this? Well, it's because we ensure that all eligible applicants receive feedback from our world-class judges. And these judges provide them with insights and guidance on how they can strengthen their businesses, how they can improve their pitches going forward. And we believe that this helps them, even if they don't win the grant funds, along their business journey. And the application process itself is also designed to encourage introspection and analysis on your business and what it is you're doing. And many of our finalists have shared with us how deeply beneficial that process is for them. And beyond this, for those who are lucky to become a top 50 or top 20 finalist, there are a range of benefits such as access to mentorship and training and a connection to a community of like-minded entrepreneurs. For our top 10 finalists, they also have the opportunity to gain international publicity via our televised Africa Business Heroes show and media opportunities. They have the opportunity to pitch to business legends such as Jack Ma, Madam Ibukun Awashika of Nigeria, Strive Masiwa, among others, as well as, of course, win their share of 1.5 million US dollars. All top 10 finalists will take home grant funds ranging from $100,000 to $300,000. And so, there are many benefits that one can gain, and it depends on where you end up along the competition. And in terms of your second question, how our past heroes have developed, we have many inspiring examples of how our past heroes have leveraged the grant funds they received and the publicity to go on to do great things. One example is our grand prize winner, Temigiwa Tobuson, who is Nigerian, founder and CEO of LifeBank. She leveraged the grant funds she received to turn LifeBank into a pan-Nigerian company and has since gone on to raise investment, launch in Kenya during the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, set up drive-through testing facilities, as well as set up an online registry of ventilators, and even launched a new product, AirBank, to to ensure that hospitals in need of oxygen are able to get it. So that's just one example. And several of our other finalists have gone on to expand their footprints geographically, expand their teams, and to collaborate with each other, further amplifying the impact that they're creating.
Okay, so with a lot of juicy benefits from there, how can one qualify? What are the qualification requirements?
Great question. So I think it's important to start off by saying we are an inclusive and Pan-African competition, which means that entrepreneurs from all sectors and from all African countries can apply. We're age, gender, and gender agnostic. We do have a very special focus on female entrepreneurs, and so we highly encourage female entrepreneurs to apply. Beyond this, we do have a set of criteria, of course. Applicants need to be the founder or co-founder of the business, so they can't just be an employee. Applicants need to be an African citizen or the direct descendant of an African national. The business needs to be registered and operated in Africa. It also needs to be post-idea stage, so it should have a track record of at least 3 years and have revenue dating at least 3 years as well. Most importantly, we're looking for mission-driven, impact-oriented businessmen and women, individuals who are creating jobs, solving pressing challenges, and doing so innovatively and competitively. So if this sounds like it could be, you and you're listening to this, you're more than qualified to apply, and we highly encourage you to do so at Africa Business Eurozone.
Yeah, it really sounds like it could be me. Thank you so much, Zara. Thank you so much for sharing this information with us, and I know that a lot of people will certainly respond to this. Enjoy the rest of your day. Well, we move on now. The World Bank has set up a new country partnership framework for Malawi, which supports the creation of more jobs, the strengthening of human capital, and supporting foundations for economic growth and accountability. The new framework will guide the World Bank Group's work over the next 5 years in support of Malawi's national priorities as set out in Malawi Vision 2063. The CPF has 3 strategic focus areas, which include bolstering foundations for growth and accountability, promoting private sector-led jobs and livelihoods, and strengthening human capital development. In addition to that, digital development and women's empowerment are integrated as cross-cutting themes. The ambassador of Qatar to South Africa says both countries are ready to sign 26 agreements and areas of cooperation this year to strengthen relationships. He adds that among these agreements is an understanding between South African Chamber and the Qatar Businessmen Association and the Qatar Chamber about establishing a joint businessmen council to enhance trade exchange between the two countries and overcome import and export obstacles, among others. Other areas of cooperation include the climate, prevention of double taxation, investment promotion, and technical and commercial cooperation. Trade volume between the two countries over the last 5 years stood at $2 billion, with an increase of 150% between 2019 and 2020. And that's it on Business Incorporated today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ini John Mekwa.